The Eagles came out with a win in this one, and I can already see that you're burying your face because it was a perplexing, frustrating win for the Eagles. Would you like to just start with talking about Nick Sirianni and how he almost cost them this game?
Yeah, let's do it. I mean,
Yeah.
I'm not an Eagles fan, but it is so frustrating. This has to be the
Mm.
most frustrating team in football. I could never be out fully on the Philadelphia Eagles because of how immensely talented they are. They are too talented for me to ever write this team off and say they can't win the Super Bowl or they can't make the playoffs. I would never do that. They're just too talented. But
Mm-hmm.
Nick Sirianni is dangerously and needlessly reckless. And I know I am Captain 1940s football. I get it. I have been planting the flag on here for a very long time. I know that I am in a probably I'm in a minority at this point when it comes to I'm always pro take the points. In most
Mm-hmm.
situations, I'm a guy that says kick the field goal. And there are just so many instances here, especially at the end of the first half. That's the one that I want to hone in here to start out with. You're down 3. You're about to go into the first half, and they don't opt to take the points. And that's the one that's puzzling to me because it's like if you would you rather be tied? And I get it. You have a chance to have a big swing at the end of the first half. We could be leading. To me, it's like you've stonewalled the Saints defensively,
Yeah.
finally. That indicates that it's probably going to be a low scoring game. Just take the points. And they run
Yeah.
a toss to Saquon. The first drive out of the first half, it's a 4th and 3. Hurts gets sacked. They pass on a field goal attempt there. So in the first half, you have 2 drives where you're in scoring territory. You could have been leading at the end of the first half. And my biggest thing, Carson, is that it inadvertently cost the Eagles last week in Atlanta. And it just shows that Sirianni is stubborn and won't change. It's like you not kicking a field goal, it didn't lose you the game against Atlanta, right? You crumbled against Atlanta. That
Mm-hmm.
was the bigger thing. But if you had kicked a field goal earlier in the game, you wouldn't have had to sweat it out at the end of the game. So I'm saying that he could have learned from that and taken the points, but Sirianni never wants to do that. Like, I thought Hurts had a solid game. He has an ugly interception in the red zone, and at this point, kind of a reputational thing with Hurts, Carson. I don't know if you're here with me. Every time Jalen Hurts pops up on my TV, I'm kind of expecting a disaster. Like,
Mm.
if it's a fumble, if it's an interception. I mentioned this on last show. He's got the most turnovers since 2023. And so every time I see him, I'm kind of expecting a turnover. And this was a good game from Jalen Hurts. I do want to give him that. 29 to 38, 311 yards. Without A.J. Brown or Devontae Smith, they end up driving down and winning this football game. Saquon Barkley has an awesome game, right? I think he's arguably the best running back in football right now. Dallas Goedert eats. But Sirianni and Hurts to me are still like the most concerning guys. Like Hurts is, and Hurts can have games. He's very talented too, but it's about the cutting out the big boneheaded turnovers and mistakes that you can't have. I don't know, man. It's like an incapability of these guys to learn from their mistakes, Carson. And Nick
Mm-hmm.
Sirianni, I don't think he's a good football coach. You said this on our
No.
last NFL show. Sirianni doesn't call the offensive plays. He doesn't call the defensive plays. So what is his job? To fuck it up? Like I'm at a loss with Sirianni, man. I don't think he's a good football coach, and he has just repeatedly screwed the Eagles situationally, man. He has shown an inability to learn from his mistakes. I
Yeah.
don't like his demeanor. I think he's emotionally volatile. I don't like that trait in a coach. I'm just out on Nick Sirianni at this point.
I am completely out on Sirianni, dude. It's remarkable. You lay it out there. His job is to be the CEO of the team, they say. So, what does that mean? You're the emotional leader of a team that completely crumbled, collapsed in remarkable fashion last year. You're the emotional leader of the team, and yet you had a significant rift with your franchise quarterback last season, and you're a professional decision maker, right? You look at these situational decisions, and that is where you step in and you show us your brilliance, and you're horrible at it. He is one of the worst decision makers in football. I think he's just an idiot, dude. And I am different from you because I'm pro aggression. I am not somebody who says take the points. I think if you believe in your offense, if you believe in your quarterback specifically, leave him on the field. If I'm watching the Buffalo Bills and it's 4th and 2 from the 28, It obviously depends on the situation, but just on average, if you don't leave Josh Allen out there and put the ball in his hands, I'm going to be annoyed. Same goes for Patrick Mahomes, right? This is just my fundamental philosophy. But Sirianni goes for it in situations where it just doesn't make sense. There's been this entire dialogue on analytics over the last few years in the NFL, right? And old-fashioned traditionalist football minds look at every single time that a team doesn't get it on fourth down, and they tend to hyper-focus on that more than the times that it does work. And they say, oh, analytics drove them to do that. Analytics is the devil, whatever. But in reality, analytics just tells you, okay, on average, statistically, based on probability, what is the correct decision? And it just so happens that more often than football convention would have suggested, it is, in terms of probability, the right decision to go for it. But that doesn't mean it's always the right decision to go for it. Ben Solak tweeted out after the Eagles went for it at the end of the first half, when you're looking at 4th and 1 with about 12 seconds on the clock from the Saints 15, that their win probability was 8% higher if they just kick the field goal, if they take the points. Because think about that, Logan. Think about what you gain from converting the 4th down. Now you have one shot at the end zone. And when everybody knows that that is your only objective, what's the probability that you get in on that one play? Maybe 25, 30%. So you stack that on top of the fact that there's probably just slightly better than a 50% chance that you convert the 4th down. Maybe worse than that with the play call that they went with, which is the other layer on top of this, because they have the tush push, the most effective short yardage play in football. They line up to do that, and then they run a counter off it instead because they want to get cute. So with the play they run, maybe there's a 50% chance that you convert that, and then maybe there's a 30% chance that you score a touchdown on your one shot at it. So in one of every 6 to 7 worlds, you could score a touchdown there, and in half the worlds, you come away with no points at all. Like, it's just a very simple cost-benefit analysis. You take the points, man, because the reality, the probability that you are going to get into the end zone is really, really quite slim, and the probability that you get stopped entirely is very legitimate, as you see in that instance. So I thought that that was terrible. And then it's like when you're on the 34, okay, that one is more justifiable, but it's 4th and a long 3. This is a game where points have been exceedingly difficult to come by. You're down 3. Get on the board, man. Build some confidence. Tie up the game, for God's sakes. You could see the fans screaming at him before that one, bro. I don't know if you saw this. They were literally showing Philly fans, like, take the fucking points, dude. Like, there were these two guys who were outraged because how many times can you see the same story over and over again? And I defended him for putting the ball in the air to Saquon on 3rd and 3 on Monday Night Football, because I thought that that was actually a play call that would have worked 90% of the time if Saquon didn't make a bad football play. I can see people not wanting to take the chance of putting the ball in the air, but that was a very, very easy catch, and he had the angle for the first down. So I think that that's a different situation, but I just think that the dude is not good at this stuff. I thought he should have been fired after last year, and I thought that this was a pretty disastrous game for him. And then later, just one more instance where you are costing yourself points. They had a 3rd and 11 from the opposing 42, and I did not like the play design, which, okay, maybe you put that on Kellen Moore, but I think Sirianni takes responsibility there too, because everything was beyond the sticks. And I get it, you want the first down, but you also have to have a check down there so you can pick up 5 or 6 yards and make it a much easier field goal. Jake Elliott is very good, but a 60-yarder is still hard for anybody, man. A 55-yarder versus 60-yarder, that's a big difference. And so the one time that they do leave it on his leg, it's an exceedingly difficult spot. Your job is to make decisions, and you're one of the worst decision makers in the league. I don't want that dude around if I'm an Eagles fan. I would be done with Sirianni. I would want to be off him immediately, because this game was just like comically frustrating for the Eagles. There was no reason for it to be this close. There was a point where they had more than triple the yardage of the Saints, and they had 0 points. They were still losing 3-0. That being said, there are some positive takeaways. Saquon is a monster. He's got over 350 yards on the ground, 5.6 yards per carry, 4 touchdowns this year. He's fantastic, thriving in this offense, of course. And I thought this was a really encouraging performance from the Philly defense. You only allowed 219 yards, 12 points. They were really effective against the run, And this has been a really, really productive Saints run game. They got some real pressure. I thought the entire defensive line was just much better. And that's been such a frustrating unit because they're so talented, but they haven't quite lived up to it. Jalen Carter and Jordan Davis both were really good in this game. And that's huge for this team's ceiling because the defense was bad through 2 weeks. I mean, they were still ranking towards the bottom of the league in every important category. And with their talent, that shouldn't be the case. They just have to sustain that improvement. But for all the Sirianni frustration and incompetence, you get out of this game with a win against a good team. Your defense looks significantly better. And so there are still positive takeaways for the Eagles.
Definitely. In the second half, they forced 5 punts, a turnover on downs, and you get the game-ending interception from Reed Blankenship. It's really the offensive performance from New Orleans and the defensive performance from Philly flipped on its head, right? The Eagles have been one of the worst defenses in the league through 2 weeks. The Saints had statistically been the best offense in the league. They hold them to 4 yards per play and just 3.1 yards per carry. I always trusted that this Eagles defensive front was going to figure it out. I'm still concerned about the secondary against really, really good competition, them just crumbling when you need them. But again, they're so talented. And that's why I think that expectations are going to determine whether Nick Sirianni keeps his job at the end of this year. Like, again, you lose the Falcons game in a heartbreaking fashion. Mm-hmm. You could have lost this one in heartbreaking fashion if, those decisions had come back to bite him on the ass. What I'm getting at is Nick Sirianni's got to be a lot smarter the rest of this year because you flip a coin and you lose some of these 50-50 games where you're making boneheaded decisions, and you could end up missing the playoffs, or you could end up losing in the playoffs again. I'm going to be honest, Carson. If the Eagles don't win a playoff game, I think Sirianni is probably going to get fired. And
I agree.
I think he has to know that. He has to play this season through that scope, and he's just got to be smarter situationally, man. Honestly, at this point, I've seen enough games and I've seen enough decisions from Sirianni to expect that he's going to continue to make bad decisions. So I'm completely out on the guy. He's got to learn from these mistakes, though, man. And if he can show that the rest of the way, maybe I'll be bought back in. But I don't know. We've seen Sirianni coach a lot of football games, and he's been needlessly reckless. And I don't like him as an emotional leader anyway either, man. Like, you talk about him being the leader. He's volatile there, man. I don't really like a guy who's crazy up or crazy down. Every time you look at Mike Tomlin on the television, he's staring a hole through you. He's stone cold.
Yeah.
I like a guy that's stoic in that regard. There's not a lot to like, in my opinion, about Sirianni. But I'm still in on the Eagles. They might still be. You say the Niners are. I think the Niners are the most talented team. I think the Eagles are probably the second most talented team still.
Yeah, very, very talented football team. And I want to be clear, man. I think you should stay aggressive. Just be smart about it and be smart with your play calls and be smart with the situations in which you prioritize getting 7 over taking 3, because this is a game where points were few and far between, man, and the Eagles cost themselves numerous points. Part of that is also Hurts throwing a pick in the end zone. I'm with you. I'm still not encouraged by what we've seen from him. He's got to be better going forward if the Eagles want to reach their ceiling, but he did just enough today, and this is a tough spot for the Eagles because there's no A.J. Brown. Devontae Smith gets hurt at the start of the 4th on a really disgusting helmet-to-helmet. Lane Johnson goes down in this game, so neither Johnson or Smith should be out for long because I think they're both concussed. But, you had to win this game without them. You're out there in 12 personnel consistently. Goddard, obviously, is the massive play on the shallow cross with the receiver running interference. That was really good stuff, but it shouldn't have been this close for the Eagles. For the Saints, I do think that we saw their limitations. They've been able to run the ball really, really well over the first couple weeks, and they need that because it's huge for them to open up play action. That's where Carr is most effective, opening up those shot plays, bringing the safeties down. That's how you get Shaheed going, and he's really only going to be effective probably on those shot plays, on those deep balls. And they tried 1 or 2 of them today, didn't convert, and so he's basically a non-factor. You just see the lack of consistent receivers outside Olave. You see the fact that Carr isn't going to be able to carry you to a win, and he ends this game throwing an interception. Basically, the concerns I would have had about the Saints offense preseason came out in this one in a way that they hadn't previously. But the defense is still really good, and I still think the Saints are a good football team. They're just not the juggernaut that obviously they acted as though they were through the first couple weeks.
Yeah, I don't have a ton to add. Carr came close to hitting with Shaheed on a few of those plays. He hit him in
Yeah,
the
for
chest
sure.
on one go. But that's a big part of the Saints offense. And when the floodgates don't open up to allow those plays, I do think you see limitations. This is a team that I think is going to struggle to sustain and create drives when they can't run the ball as effectively. They are a good football team, but again, they're not the upper echelon contender that I think some people may have penciled them in to be after the first 2 weeks. I do think this defense is good, and I've been really, really impressed with the Saints' offensive line through 3 weeks. It's one area I want to
Definitely.
give them credit because I thought the Saints may have one of the worst O lines in football. That's not the case. They're really solid up front.
Agreed. It's been impressive overall from the Saints. Don't want to take away from that. This just was a bit of a comeback to earth performance.